Okay, so now it's time to move on to tutorial session number 4, and in this it's 4.1, inserting a report item. So we're going to go through all the things that we need to do for inserting a report. Okay, so the first location where we use the report option is Dad's laboratory. And in Dad's laboratory we had 3 actions. The first one was ask Dad to test the water. Now, if you have, on the one that you're working on, if you haven't already created these actions, I'd recommend just pausing now and getting a little bit more practice in creating actions, and then when you're ready, start this again and you'll see how we add a report. Okay, so the first action was ask Dad to test the water. The content actually says, sure, no problem, did you bring the bowl with you? Now, this is important because, once again, this is going to trigger a prerequisite. They must have collected the bowl for something to happen. So our next action was, now Dad can test the water. So obviously this action cannot occur until the fish bowl has been collected. So we will be looking at that prerequisite in a second. But let's go ahead and add the report on this one. So if we click on now Dad can test the water, we want this button here, which is Insert Report Item. So click on that one and you'll get this dialog box, adding a report item. And the first thing that we've got here is identifying name. Now this is just a short, simple name. Generally I use a numerical system. So I'm going to say 1.1 because this is the first place that I'm using a report, and then if I wanted to use maybe 2 or 3 reports on one page, I'll just do 1.1, 2 and 3. The next one is the actual question that you're going to be asking. So this was, choose which items you want to test for. Okay, and the type of reports that we've got is a single line text report. So obviously that's not suitable. That one is for when you need the students to make a short written response, or maybe a 1-sentence response. A multi-line text box when you need a paragraph or 2 or even longer for the student to actually analyze and give critique about something. We have multiple choice questions when there can be only one correct answer. And we have check choice, where there can be multiple correct answers, or you're wanting them to select off a series of things. And then we also have fill in the blank, which is the most recent type of report that we have added. Fill in the blank is basically a sentence where you leave out the word that you want them to enter in. So it's very important for a student at this point to get the spelling correct, and might be worthwhile pointing that out to them when they're trying to answer a question. Okay, so let's choose check choice question. And this next section here is the headings for user feedback table. So in the table we've got possible choice headings. So we've got possible options is the heading. So it's not that significant. I'll point it out when we actually see what the report looks like. But yeah, you can actually customize these things if you'd like. So user choice heading, your choice, quite simple. And choice feedback. So it's just choice feedback. Up to you if you want to change that. I always leave them as default. The additional settings are where you can select whether the report is going to be scored. Now this can come in very handy for using the prerequisite builder as well, because you can say that an option doesn't occur unless a report has scored above a certain mark. So it gives you a lot more flexibility. You also have the option, if you do choose to score it, you also have the option to reveal the scores to users. And then of course you can accumulate scores. For now, I'm going to turn that setting off because it's not necessary. And in here we've got the sample solution or possible options. So what do we want Dad to test for? So firstly, we're going to get him to test for chemicals. And then we want to test for bugs. Now in here is our response if selected, and you also have the option of putting a response if not selected. So if something is really important and that they should have selected and they didn't, then you might want to give them a reason for why they should have selected this option. Okay, so now we can just, from the Word document, copy in the responses. So chemicals, the response was there's no really nasty chemicals, but there's a lot of chlorine, and chlorine is used to kill bugs. And the next one for bugs, the feedback is the water was bug-free. So our last step in creating a report is add this report item. So you click on that, and what this is doing is reminding you that you need to have a submit button. So say OK. Now the submit button is this button right here, insert a submit button. Now the reason we put that in separately is because you can have a number of reports on one page. So let's just do a control tab so you can see what this looks like. So we're going to go to player mode. So this is our report, and we can select both of them and we can say submit. And as you can see, this is where we were talking about those headings, so your choice. You can see the little ticks so the user knows which one they chose, and the choice feedback as the feedback's there. Now no scores are shown there, so I will now actually add the score so you can see what that's going to look like. So to re-enter into a report, all you have to do is double click and it pulls up the report. So now I'm going to actually select scores. I want to reveal scores so that you actually can see them, and I'm going to accumulate the scores as well, and of course give it a score. So I'm going to say chemicals got 5 points and bugs I'm going to say 3, and apply. Now it's always going to give you this hint regardless of whether you've already added a submit button, but it is very handy to remember that because it's one of those simple things that can be forgotten, and if it is forgotten, students have no way of actually submitting the report. Okay, so control tab again, select those options again. As you can see, an actual score of 5 and a possible score of 5, so our total score is 8. If I do a control tab back to Builder, control tab player, and I'm just going to select chemicals this time, you'll see I got an actual score of 5 and an accumulated score of 5. I'll just show you a quick example, even though it wasn't done on the actual tutorial. The reason why we have the submit button separately is so that we can add multiple reports on one page. So this time I could insert a report, and I'm going to call this one 1.2, and I'm going to say justify your selection. And I want that to be a multi-line text box because I want them to explain why they've done this. Now this one here, our default setting is actually quite narrow. It's only 15%. So I want it to be 85%. When we're talking about percentage, we're talking about the percentage of the width of the content page. So if I put that at 85 and leave it as 80, I'll say add report item, OK. Already has a submit button, so I don't need to worry about that. When I do a control tab to look at the player, I will see that I've got this as a fairly decent place where they can add their responses, make their selection, and say submit. And you can see that we've got the heading of the question, what we're choosing it for, and then justify your selection. And again, the accumulated score at the bottom of the page. Okay, once again, I'm going to flick to our Builder mode, and we'll just finish off these actions before looking at the prerequisites again. And I'm going to click on your conclusions. So this is another example of a report, and the prerequisite that we're going to add with this action is going to be that it won't appear until this report has actually been submitted. So that's going to be slightly different in the prerequisite builder as well. So your conclusions. We'll click here and we're going to insert a report item. This one will be 1.3 because I left 1.1 and 1.2 on the previous. Now of course that doesn't have to follow a numerical sequence, that's just my preference. You can choose to name it whatever you'd like. my conclusions, and I'm going to make this multiple choice because we only have one right answer. And if you go to your Word document, you can copy and paste in the options. Okay, so there wasn't enough light. They were starved or overfed. The water was toxic. As you can see here, it looks like you've gotten to the end of your options, but remember you've got this scroll bar here, and it will keep on adding as many boxes as you need as you keep entering in options. So I'm going to then say the fly spray was toxic is the last one. So if I needed a new box, there'd be the next one, but it's grayed out at the moment because I'm not using it. So the ones that are completely white are the ones that have been entered. Now let's add some feedback. And lastly, I think I will score this so I can show you an example of scoring above a certain amount. So we want the correct answer to be the pool was toxic, so I'm going to give that 5 points. And then we're done for that one, so we can say add this report. Don't forget to give it a submit button, which is this one here. And we're finished with that page. So now we can look at the prerequisites to finish off this scenario.